let's talk about the series, The Indian in the Cupboard, I think is more or less the series name. Really something like Omri in the Cupboard would be helpful because the first book is called Indian in the Cupboard. I have talked about that first book separately. This is 5 books by Lynne Reid Banks. The Indian in the Cupboard, The Return of the Indian, The Secret of the Indian, The Key to the Indian, and The Mystery of the Cupboard. And this published from the very early 80s through to about 99 or so, I think, Mystery of the Cupboard. So nearly 20 years, like 18 years or so. Oh no, 10, I'm lying through my teeth. 10 years, about 10 years, just over, that she was writing it. And it is about, basically, it's about a preteen into tween, into maybe very early teens. But, over the course of a couple of years, basically, in world, a boy called Omri finds a magic key, and he has a cupboard that he's given for his birthday. Well, he's given him a key by his mum, and he's given a cupboard for his birthday that his brother found out in the yard, or in the back alley. And he's like, cool, I can have a little secret place, because it's cool, you're an 11-year-old, you have a little secret place with a lock. And then he puts his Red Indian figure in it, because he's storing his Red Indian figure that he's got, a little plastic toy, and he turns alive, and it turns out he's an Iroquois from the 18th century in New York State, and he's a proud, quite difficult warrior called Little Bull. And essentially the adventure spins out from here, over the 5 books. And it's not an all-time great series. This is why I'm doing this video rather than why you should read the Indian in the Cupboard series. It is a sort of second tier thing, really, but it is very fun. I read it with my kids. My kids are, I should say, 6, 4, 2, and 0. At the very top end of this, I certainly had to very slightly, I'm afraid, bowdlerise Mystery of the Cupboard at a few points. But there's just a tiny bit of editing later on that was necessary. But for the first book was actually, maybe the first 2 books, we were very well matched to where my eldest son's kind of listening age is. And by the back end, there may be some things which were just not, a bit harder to navigate. Certainly it hits early-ish YA by the end, but very much at the kind of milder end. It's middle grade. Yeah, I think it is, you're talking about, it's over 1,000 pages. It's Lord of the Rings length, so it's Lord of the Rings quality, right? That's how it works. Over 1,000 pages, and it's very good at these kind of like, here is a set of incidents, and here is a reasonable plot. The plots are never really the selling point. There is often an important bit of plot that's fun and you care about, but really it's the characters dealing with these little people, which is the attraction. And Omri, his best friend Patrick, and the other people who kind of either find out a bit about it or try to find out about it, or who they're trying to stop finding out about it. And the different small people, because what we get is an opportunity for a time machine. This is the big thing, really, is that we get this time machine of and a really wonderfully well presented, sensitive, sympathetic view of people from the past. Omri and Little Bull, Omri and Little Bull have to meet across cultures that are very different, and which they alienate each other. And Little Bull is quite a difficult person, but also he is an incredibly sympathetic presentation of a young man at the start of the books who's growing up, who has his insecurities, who has his own difficulties, and who this big person who's like, is this person a god, or is this person what's going on? Kind of goes through with him. There's also, and the other major little person is called Boone, who's a cowboy from 100 years later. And initially, Boone and Little Bull do not get on, but that is a major plot point, is how the Omri, Patrick, Boone, and Little Bull deal with stuff, and the fact that they are to various degrees all difficult people, but sensitively and sympathetically presented. There are very many other characters. Corporal Fickets and Matron and Tommy are the most obvious and famous, and Ruby Lou, Twin Stars, Little Bear. Many great characters you meet along the way, who from different eras, with different kind of bits of history you learn about, and some some quite serious emotional stakes and quite moving things. There's possibly a couple of very moving things. But in the second book, particularly, I'm thinking about some very moving stuff with one of the little people characters. And so you've got their stories, and particularly the story of the Indians at the end of the American Revolution. They're friends of the British, but then the Americans are going to win that war, and that's going to create more tension with the Iroquois. And this whole arc that runs across that of the story of an Indian, a story of an Indian experience, Native American. This is an interesting thing. Is initially it's the Indian, and Lynne Reid Banks kind of self-edits over time to where they discuss, they prefer to be called Native Americans, things like that. And there's a bit of that. There's a bit of an attempt to try to grapple with some of these issues, which people will prefer one solution or another, but I think, that's there. The other big thing that goes on, which is interesting, is, and it's low-key, really until the last couple of books, but it's always there and it develops slowly. And even, I think, at the end of the first or second book, you start to think, most second, but is where is the magic coming from? That's really the point, is where is the magic coming from? What's the magic in this weird situation? Because obviously, look, plastic people don't come to life when I put a key in a lock. And Omri is like, is it the cupboard? Is it the key? What's going on? Does it work with different materials? What does it work with? And by, I think it's book 3 and 4, you start to get kind of like, what about if this kind of weird thing happened? Books 2, well, even book 2, at the end of book 2, I think, you start to get this like, what about this kind of, if you messed around the magic in this way, or what if you did this? There start to be these world-building questions, if you like, which don't matter very much in the first book, because you have Little Bull and Boone, and they're just messing around and they're little people, and that's fine. And you deal with the situation of borrowers, basically, in our world. But then, as it goes on, she does start to explore these things. And so you've got an interesting second strand of how does the fantasy work? This kind of fundamentally soft magic system, I guess we'd call it now. But how does it work? And that's really interesting and fun extra thread that goes alongside also seeing Omri grow up, because part of these books is about Omri growing up and coming to terms with himself and with responsibility. A big thing he learns is this responsibility he has for these small people he has made alive and are suddenly in great danger if something happens, and the great power and great responsibility of having a magic key or cupboard. It's a very interesting set of books in that way, that deals with ethics, it deals with friendship, it deals with culture, it deals with the magic, and in some cases some of the plots are fairly vestigial, like I think book 3, The Secret of the Indian, the what's it called? Mystery of the Cupboard is book 4, isn't it? Book 4, Mystery of the Cupboard, has a fairly vestigial plot, basically, if we're honest. Where and even really book 3, The Secret of the Indian, kind of is just there. Whereas The Return of the Indian and The Key to the Indian both have something more going on. But yeah, they're very fun books, and I recommend. I mean, it depends. If you're not going to enjoy middle grade fantasy on your own, don't read them on your own. If you might, I wouldn't. And I think some middle grade fantasy is very good for adults. Dark is Rising, Narnia, for instance, those two are very good. But yeah, this is fun, and I think you might enjoy it. But even if that's not necessarily your taste, you might enjoy it with your kids. Anyway, if you've read these, tell me what you think, and I will see you next time.